Good evening, welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, a huge day for India. Finally, the government has decided to pay for vaccines for all citizens in all states above the age of 18. Why was this not done earlier? Be that as it may, it is a great step because it ends the massive confusion that exists on variable pricing. It also comes a few days after the Supreme Court observed that India's vaccine policy for 18 to 44-year-olds was arbitrary. So the big question is this: how many Indians above the age of 18 will we be able to vaccinate by the end of December? That is the target group the government has set, and they hope to be vaccinating at the whopping rate of 1 crore a day. That will be approximately 4 times more than what we are managing on an average of late. But before we get to that, there's another key aspect of this. Where are the vaccines? Yes, they'll be free. Yes, that policy of free vaccines, should you choose not to go to a private hospital, because that's also an option where you do pay. But if you do want it free, where are those vaccines? In fact, where are the vaccines for private hospitals as well? So let's bring you a couple of details and roll out this graphic. Now, bring up that graphic if we can. Right. Where are the vaccines? Now, look at the vaccines on your screen. By the end of December, and these are the government's own numbers, they expect 76 crore doses of Covishield to be rolled out, Covaxin 66.8, Sputnik V 25.7, Zykov D is Zydus Cadila 4.7 crore, so not very many. Corevax is BioE, that's a wonderful Indian company, 30 crore doses. HGCO9 is Genova, I believe, that's 6 crore doses. Covaxin's nasal spray, that's very ambitious, 10 crore doses. Janssen, 20 crore doses. Covovax, which is what the Serum Institute of India is producing with Novavax, as many as 20 crore doses. That's 9 vaccines in total. But now here's a reality check. 6 out of those 9 vaccines are still being tested. Only 3 are in the market. So where is the government going to actually be able to roll out 6 of those vaccines and then clear it after the trial process is over and evaluated and accepted, get them to start manufacturing and roll out at those numbers that they seek, and have that 259.22 crore doses by the end of December? These are government numbers which have actually been released. It seems unrealistic. Perhaps India will need to rely more on imports, but then that begs the question, do we have that possibility? Are there that number of imports? To what extent will the Serum Institute or Bharat Biotech, which are producing, be able to ramp up even more? So lots of unanswered questions at this stage. Well, joining us for the very latest, Pinky Anand, T.S. Singh Deo, the Health Minister of Chhattisgarh, Praveen Chakravarti of the Congress Party, Amitabh Behar, the CEO of Oxfam India, and Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw joins us in a little while as well. Let me go across to you, Mr. Deo, first. Is this a step that you welcome? It's come late. Keep the politics aside. If it's free, it helps you run the state and it helps millions in your state.
Good evening, Vishnuji.
Good evening.
Good evening, all our co-panelists, distinguished co-panelists. Good evening to all the viewers. Certainly, Vishnu, better late than never. And this is something which should have been seen from day one. I am very surprised that we are talking today of making vaccines available in end of December. That will be far too late in terms of the waves. It's not the third wave people are talking about. It's the nth wave that now people are talking about. So to vaccinate people as soon as possible, we are very, very late. What we should have done in January, February, we are trying to achieve by July, August end. So that is where we should be, 1 crore vaccines a day, so that we can have our population vaccinated by the end of January. That is what we should be looking at.
So, sir, just so that Mr. Singh Deo, just so that we are clear on this, that target of 259.22 crore doses is the government target of total doses by the end of December. That isn't to say that doses will not come earlier. The question is, will they come in time, and will at least one citizen get 1 jab by the end of December? I think that's realistic. Would you agree?
If this works out, it should certainly be so. But what we have been seeing so far is a limitation expressed on the part of the companies also to be able to ramp up their production. They're not saying they would be, for example, we have Bharat Biotech. They're not talking about 10 crore vaccines in a month. They're talking about 2 crores, 3 crores, 4 crore vaccines in a month.
Yes.
A Serum Institute, they're not talking about 20 crore vaccines in a month. They are talking about 10, 12 crore vaccines in a month. So those are the limitations. And that is where we must put our full attention in. Not in vaccinating, in getting the vaccines. That should be priority
So again,
number.
just as a point of clarification, the Serum Institute, the expectation of the government is 76 crores. Even if they go with the rate of 12 crore a month, right? With in 6 months, which is what is approximately left, if they were to ramp up, you'd have them at about 72 crores. They'd be in that ballpark range. Covaxin a bit less by anyhow. Just a point. I wanted to go across to Praveen Chakravarti of the Congress. In fact, before I go across to Praveen, let me go across to Amitabh Behar, who also joins us. Amitabh, so we are through with one part of this horrible problem, who pays, right? So that's great. I think everybody welcomes it. When can we start saying that we are successful in our vaccine strategy? How many people would you like to see vaccinated before we actually see the numbers plummet? Because if those numbers don't plummet, then we'll continue being in trouble.
So thank you, Vishnu. I must say that this is certainly a very welcome step. As part of the People's Vaccine Alliance, we've been really asking for a free vaccine globally. But I think, one of the big lessons what we have learned is that you cannot have unitary decision making without consulting states or common people. And that's the problem that's going to continue if we are not going to talk to people. At this moment, what we're looking at is still extremely inadequate numbers. So you've just given us the numbers. It doesn't look realistic that by end of December, we're going to have enough jabs for the Indian population. Let me just say that, we've been part of studies where most of the epidemiologists are saying that the first generation vaccines are not going to be effective after 10 to 12 months. So we really have a small window of 10 to 12 months, and we need to really scale up our production. And we need to think of creative ways. Why are we not looking at compulsory licensing? That's part of the Indian Patents Act. That's something that we must do, and we start looking at generic drugs. So this is great that we've moved into free vaccines, but we need to now, the battle that we have taken to the WTO, great that India took it there, and it's great that US is backing it now. But it's going to be a long conversation in WTO.
This was reported several weeks back, Amitabh. It's not really moved at the WTO. If we are fighting against time, we are nowhere on that.
So, Vishnu, it's going to take a very long time.
So
but
it's pointless.
Within the country, we can, within the Indian Patents Act, actually look at compulsory licensing. And these are the ideas that we must look at.
Sure.
The bottom line is, Vishnu, let me say one line, that if you don't consult a whole range of stakeholders, we will fumble the way we have fumbled over the last few weeks. And when the bodies are being counted, that's the reality that we are looking at.
Okay. Pinky Anand, this comes a few days after the Supreme Court said that the policy of the government in vaccination for those between 18 to 44 was arbitrary. So, and that case is something that's being heard. Did it really need the government to act after the Supreme Court said this? Couldn't this have been done earlier?
Vishnu, this is such a perpetual dilemma that everybody has. The question is the action something which should have been taken? It is being taken. If you think it happens overnight, it's very unlikely that such an action is something which is overnight. It is obviously some part of policy making and planning which has been going on. Just because the Supreme Court did say a few words or whatever was said as part of vaccination and what should happen, that doesn't mean that that's the impetus for this to happen. Let's come to the point in hand, honestly speaking. The only concern that everybody has, and Amitabh was very rightly talking about some of the things that we should be looking at, but nobody can say that this is not a good thing that has happened. You try, ultimately with the population of this country, you try various measures. I am not saying that it has been the greatest efficient discharge. I cannot. But at the same time, the attempts have been always to reach there. And this is part of that attempt to see that the center takes over. You give 75% vaccines to the states, 25% to the hospitals, etc., so that you can actually try to reach the numbers. At one point, for example, I must say, he's right. Amitabh is right to compulsory licensing. This is something which is part of the business process and can be considered. But 6 out of the 9 vaccines that we were talking about, earlier, they are in the process of development. These emergency measures, look, at the same time, we have to leave it sometimes to health experts to decide in which cases you can permit and you can't permit. This pandemic is something which has hit us from every side of the corner, and we just don't know what, because it's a word from the blue. So you are dealing with it. Yes, he's right. There are differences. There are mutations. Nobody knows are absolutely 100% correct answers. The only question is that the attempt is being made so that the health mechanisms can keep pace. There have been difficulties. Let's be there. But today, the vaccination seems to be one of the only methods. And the more we can multiply that and to make it available, and it has been scaling up. There have been periods, but it's been scaling up. And that's what at least I would look to.
Sure.
Never I would like to look at a situation where you're talking about what is the negative part of it and why it shouldn't have been some other way.
No, this is all positive, ma'am. It is great. It is fantastic that this headache is out. That money factor has been sorted, at least for the moment. We can get on to the business of vaccinating people. The real question is, do we have the vaccines to do that? I think that's a bit of a worry in the numbers that we want. Praveen Chakravarti, as we move to the next stage of the physical act of vaccinating people, assuming for a moment we have the numbers, from a weekly, monthly state for various, states in the country, if we have the vaccines, do we still have the ability to step up vaccination fourfold? Because if we are doing about 25 lakhs a day, we are not even doing that, and we want to step up to 1 crore a day, that is an incredible jump. How does that happen?
Sure. See, assuming that the supply exists, that there is no shortage of vaccine, I am quite confident that the state governments across the country have the capability to ramp up vaccination. The only factor that we will perhaps have to consider is vaccine hesitancy. There are reports that are coming in that, and we cannot dismiss that. There are some serious concerns that people have expressed. Certainly in southern states such as Tamil Nadu, there is a severe skepticism about vaccines in general. So how do we get over that? This is where political leadership will matter. But as far as just implementing and getting people vaccinated, I mean, let's not forget, we're a country that runs elections for 800 million people. So I am not doubtful at all about our ability to get people vaccinated across. And this is where the state governments come in, and they, we have exceptional people like Mr. Singhdeo in charge in states like Chhattisgarh. I don't see that as a problem.
Mr.
Can we get over hesitancy?
Let me ask you this: how would you, as a health minister, deal with vaccine hesitancy? In your state, it is a problem in tribal areas of the state where people are not at all comfortable. They don't know what vaccines are all about, and they want to avoid it. How do you actually ensure that you can vaccinate?
Chhattisgarh?
Yes, sir, in Chhattisgarh. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to share this with you, that apart from the very remote tribal areas, which would be the Naxal affected areas, also known as the Naxal affected areas, there may be a little hesitancy to get there. But I'll also share with you that there is more hesitancy in Raipur district than other districts. It is a misnomer to say tribals are hesitant. It is not correct. Many more urban people are hesitant than tribals are hesitant. Tribals would be, much more willing to follow the lead. If something is being done and it is being seen to be fairly safe, they would be accepting it. And we've already crossed 77% of vaccination for 45 plus. So I don't really see that as a problem. But to reach maximum saturation, there we need to get more people to help us out, whether they are political leaders, whether they are social leaders, whether they are religious leaders, whether they are government servants. There we need to pitch in to reach 90% plus. 90%, I don't have any doubts.
All right. Amitabh Behar, is it also time for us to have to stomach failure in our vaccination development program? 6 of 9 are being trialed should we expect a few of them to not work and therefore accept that they won't and then find out an alternative to that?
So, Vishnu, I really hope that all these work. And we have a tremendous amount of scientific know-how community in this country. Let's hope it's going to work. But I think the critical question is, will we be able to ramp up the supplies adequately in the short window of time? I have no doubt that we'll get it. But the question is, in the next few months, are we going to get it? So that's really the critical question. And therefore, we need to look at a menu of options, starting with, as I was saying, compulsory licensing, to looking at really how do we import at a much greater level, and also backing these new initiatives that we have. And as Praveen is saying, I completely agree. I'm very confident that the Indian systems would be able to deliver the vaccines. But the question is, can we get those vaccines? Because just look at the numbers even now. As in just 4%, not even 4%, have got both the jabs. I got my first jab and I still got COVID after that. So, it's critical that we must ensure we get both jabs. And then the larger question of vaccine hesitancy is a critical question, in which I think people like me and my friends across the civil society needs to really play an active role. Okay. We need to reach out, speak to people. It is an important point, and I think a collective effort. Again, the bottom line for me, Vishnu, I feel is that this is a moment where how do we bring everybody together?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's where I keep feeling that if there were consultations with a range of people, I think we would have not lost these several weeks and few months, which has resulted in really tragic losses.
Pinky Anand, one final question to you. We are told that it's going to cost about 65,000 plus odd crore rupees. And it ultimately boils down to the fact that if you want to vaccinate in the numbers that we do, it is going to cost a huge amount of money. This is what countries like the United States, like Canada, like the United Kingdom, several countries in the European Union have known, which is why they were ready and spent that money even last year. Is this a mistake that we should have been willing to spend this amount of money last year so that we wouldn't be in the position where we are today?
See, you can always say a lot of things in hindsight, Vishnu. Definitely what should have been done and what could have been done, and we could have averted, we couldn't have averted. For example, I can talk about UK. UK went through such a crisis and then ultimately turned over from one philosophy to another. There were various aspects that were being discussed or thought about, and nobody is 100% right in this pandemic. Everybody is hazarding to some extent because it's an unknown situation which has come on our heads. It's like a predatory kind of a disease that is there. So really speaking, I always believe that there must be complete optimism going forward from where you are. You can always look back and say, I should have done this. Why could this purchase of vaccines by Centre have been done a few months back? Why could we have had, let us say, some more vaccines developed at that stage? Vaccine development itself, Vishnu, is something that does take a bit of time.
A lot of
I've worked on these health vaccines, and if viruses mutate during that time, as Amitabh is saying, possibly the first vaccine may not be accessible or effective after 12 months. But the point is, you have to work with what you have. You have to have faith. I know so many people who resisted getting the vaccines, and I had to persuade people, talk to people, literally bully them into saying, get it. And it's across surface. It's not only tribals and any specific class, but definitely there are some categories which seem to believe that you could have death after getting vaccine. So we need to work on this as a project is what it is. And yes, we need to put in every other effort, whether to get more vaccines from abroad, develop 6, develop another 10. For example, the DRDO medicine vaccine that came out, which was released about 3 weeks
I mean, anecdotally, I know people who probably owe their life to that DRDO medication. There are those who say that a lot more of the research is missing. So it's a leap of faith at so many levels.
It's a leap of faith. I think the Vishnu, I couldn't say
we can say that we needed a leap of faith last year. We should have bought the vaccines last year and had been ready to accept that some of them wouldn't work. Anyway, we can go on with that. It's a good day. It is a positive day. I don't want to at all take away from that. And let us just hope that the vaccines come. because I sense that in our country, the act of actually vaccinating people, stepping up the numbers, will be far less of a problem than getting hold of the vaccines themselves.
It is no problem in this country. If the vaccines are there, the chairperson is right and everybody else is right on that front. We will have it implemented. There is no difficulty whatsoever. This country has amazing potential, but you need to kind of take it forward from the point at which it is. To say today, we will vaccinate. Let's go with that. That's the only manner in which we can.
Well, they say the numbers will really start coming in July, in the numbers we need. Thanks very much, ma'am, for being with us. I want to quickly go across now to Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. Ma'am, thanks very much for being with us this evening. Your reaction to this decision: one huge headache gone. It's going to be free unless you choose to pay for it, and I think that's really welcome, right?
I think this is a very important course correction that the government has made for two reasons. One is, of course, they announced that vaccination was open to all the adult population above 18 years of age. Secondly, they also basically got rid of this ambiguity of state, center and private sector kind of vaccine procurement. So now it's very clear it's just government procurement and then there is 25% allocated for private procurement. That actually simplifies the whole matter. However, we still need to understand that whilst the government will basically be able to procure vaccines at various price points because each vaccine will have a different pricing, but as far as the common man is concerned, they don't have to worry about what price they have to pay for the vaccine because they get it free. But I think in the private hospitals, I think people must understand that they will have various prices, on a menu available to them, depending on what vaccine they opt for getting. So for instance, we know that the Sputnik vaccine is priced at whatever, 950 or 1,000 rupees. That the Covaxin is also at a different price point. You know that the Covishield is at a different price point. I'm sure when Zydus Cadila comes in, they will have their own pricing. So you're going to look at the various vaccines just like you would look at a medication.
Sure.
At different price points.
Sure.
So I think the private person who wants to go to a private hospital at their convenience and get the vaccine of their choice, they will have to pay a very different price. Those who are willing to come under the routine government system obviously gets free vaccination, which I think is extremely important. And as far as the government is concerned, I think they need to procure vaccines at any price that they can get.
And assuming, of course, that is available. Point taken, ma'am. Thanks so much for being with us this evening and sharing some of your thoughts.